So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our online audience. I hope that the audio is working well, but if anything, please let us know via chat so that we can fix it. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today at our workshop, From Bioresources to Bioeconomy, Building a Low-Carbon Future for Feed in the EU. My name is Carolina Rodriguez Balda, and I am the Bioeconomy Policy Manager at Bellona in Brussels. This morning, we will be presenting and discussing opportunities to produce more feed with a low carbon footprint in Europe. A recent study from the European Environment Agency titled Opportunities for Innovation in the Bioeconomy highlighted that the 32 member countries generate only about half of the biocapacity needed to sustain current consumption. At the same time, around 38% of this biomass is used for animal feed, showing how crucial it is to improve the efficiency and sustainability of feed production if we are to build a truly low-carbon bioeconomy. And that is precisely the focus of today's workshop, exploring how innovative approaches can unlock more sustainable and systems across Europe. Without any further ado, I will give the floor to Ms. Berit Bugan-Am, head of the bioeconomy team in Oslo. Berit, the floor is yours.
Okay, so welcome to everyone in the room and online. We are more than 100 people registered today. Can you hear me? Okay, so I'm the leader of the bioeconomy team in Oslo, and we are hosting this event together with our team here in Brussels. So for those of you not so familiar with Bellona, I will give you a brief introduction to Bellona first. Bellona was founded in the 80s as an action and protest group. But today, the Bellona Environmental Foundation is a science-based NGO. The headquarters is in Oslo, but we also have offices in Brussels, Berlin, and Vilnius. And we are in total almost 100 Bellonistas today. Our main goals are to combat the climate crisis, environmental degradation, pollution-induced hazards to human health, and the ecological consequences of economic development strategies. This is taken straight from our webpage. But we have a focus on finding sustainable solutions to these challenges, and we think it's possible to address environmental challenges in a constructive manner. We also think that industry can adapt to new challenges if they have the right long-term and predictable framework conditions. So therefore, Bellona aims to be a bridge between industry and decision makers. Okay, so here in Bellona, here in Brussels, Bellona has been for over 30 years, advocating towards the European institutions on how to decarbonize
Just exchanged both for the moments.
Okay. Okay, so I'll continue. In Brussels, our main focus areas are markets and incentives, energy systems, carbon accounting, embodied carbon, and also more recently bioeconomy. In Oslo, we have teams working on carbon capture and storage. We have the material and industry team, the transport and energy team, and also the bioeconomy team. So I'm the leader of the bioeconomy team in Bellona, and we are currently around 10 people in the team in Oslo, and we have experts working on a broad range of topics connected to bioeconomy. And aquaculture is one of Norway's largest export industries, and Bellona has been working with challenges related to aquaculture and the oceans for many years. We are currently working on projects on plastics in aquaculture, how to scale up low-trophic aquaculture, marine restoration projects, and also sustainable feed for both aquaculture and agriculture. So in 2022, we published a report called What Should a Salmon Eat? And this is a roadmap and a barrier study for new raw materials for feed. My colleague Olav, he will present this study later today. This report was a collaboration between Bellona and the feed companies in the blue sector in Norway. Today, in 25, we are expanding our work on feed to also include the green sector. So a little about the LIFE program. LIFE is the EU's funding instrument for the environment and climate action and has been running since the 90s. It's an operating grant for non-profit organizations. The LIFE program supports projects aligned with the EU Green Deal and environmental and climate legislation. In Bellona, we received the LIFE grant from 2025. And one of the work packages is on bioeconomy, and we were therefore able to expand our bioeconomy work also to our Brussels office. And Carolina here, she started working in the bio team in June, and she's located here in Brussels. This workshop on feed is part of this LIFE program. In addition, we are working on a couple of reports this fall that will be published early next year. Here we're looking at the current situation for biomass availability in Europe and where it could be possible to upscale production of biomass. And feed is one of the focus areas, of course, but we're also looking at biomass for different uses. Biomass is and will be a limited resource, and we are looking on how to best use the biomass. We believe that the potential for upscaling low-trophic aquaculture and kelp farming is substantial in Europe, and that this can be a great addition to the bioeconomy in the future. We are therefore planning another workshop in the spring next year on that topic. But today, I'm glad to be here to meet stakeholders working in the bioeconomy, and I hope this will be a nice meeting place for having fruitful discussions on sustainable feed. So thank you.
So I have a presentation to give on sustainable feed in the context of the upcoming EU Bioeconomy strategy. So I'm Ante van den Brink from the Netherlands originally, but I've been in Belgium already for 12 years and in the role of Deputy Secretary General now, but I have a track record in sustainability, let's say. So, enough about myself, I was going to say. I was going to introduce FIFAC, but the pointer, do I need to switch it on? No, it just worked before. So. Okay, so I see my slide coming up on so FIFAC, European Compound Feed Manufacturers Association. So what we represent national associations. We have 28 national associations across Europe. There you go. Yeah, including Norway. I think interesting to hear from for the audience today. Founded in 1959, so we've been around for over a good 65, 66 years. And yeah, this is an important one. I'm almost afraid to use it. No, pointer doesn't work. Doesn't matter. Oh, it's you. Your pointer. So I have to one back, because I wanted to show what compound feed manufacturing is about. In the pie chart, it's like 22% of what livestock animals consume. So we are not the producer of all feed that is being consumed in Europe. You see that the largest share is I missed something. Forages is the big share. So that you talk about grass, forages is what cattle eat, and then you also have a big chunk that is coming directly from the farm. We have our president here, and good to know that we are a member of an international feed federation. But let's move on. Okay, so you're switching it for me now. Okay, circular feed in the bioeconomy. So I want to talk about this concept we have. We call it circular feed. So we go to the next slide, which hopefully makes it clear. I mean, you could talk about livestock farming, aquaculture in the larger scope of the bioeconomy. You get your nutrients from a certain area, you have your waste, and you try to make that close the loop as good as you can. And we put some effort into describing when you have nutrients being upcycled from the circular bioeconomy into animal feed, and then you of course have this upcycling effect of nutrients. It goes into animals, it gets upgraded, let's say, within their bodies, and then you have these highly bioavailable nutrients for human consumption, like more highly bioavailable than feeding the feed ingredients directly to humans. So we have this concept where we look at, okay, how would you qualify something as being a circular feed? What would you say that it's really coming from the circular economy? And we look at, okay, what is the status of the resource? Is it food grade? Is it feed grade? Of course, the less edible it is by a human being directly, the more it is a resource from the bioeconomy. Yeah, land use ratio is another important one, like how much land do you really need to allocate to the creation of this resource. So I'll have some examples which will hopefully make it a bit more clear. And you saw also the figure with like, I think the statistics were, it's on the previous slide, it's like feed is a big chunk of what goes, what is, let's say, used in biomass. So 38% is the latest figure from 2022. And energy is up and coming, 28% now, but I'll come to that. But just that awareness that indeed feed and biomass, yeah, there's quite a strong connection. Go to the next slide. And this story of circular feed, everybody knows the Green Deal. I don't know how many are familiar with the competitiveness compass. Yeah, some nods heading. But the Green Deal was, in the Green Deal context, it was a good story, circular feed and circularity. I think you hit one more for the slide, and you will see this arrow appearing that if you look at the competitiveness compass with these key objectives on closing innovation gap, linking decarbonization and competitiveness, reducing dependency and increasing security, the circularity story is still a very good story to tell. So we're able to tell the same story as from 3 years ago when we released this publication on circular feed. So I'm going to show a bit on the next slide what we have in this publication. So I think the examples are let's say most prolific of being able to demonstrate what we can do. So this is just a snapshot of the introductional content, but here you see a bit more concretely examples. So you look at milk production and you have an end product like cheese. There are nutrients like whey and skimmed milk powder. Okay, these can of course also go into food, but it's also the quantities you have to keep in mind that then will be used by feed. Beer production, when you go from cereals to beer, you have these brewer's grains or spent grains, brewer's yeast, and actually statistics that I've heard is that for each kilo of end product from, let's say, biomass processing for food, you will have like 5 to 8 kilos of biomass that is not usable in human consumption. So across all kind of different food processing sectors, including sugar, but also meat production itself, we are there, let's say, as the compound feed manufacturing sector to harness these nutrients and put them into a compound feed. Animal fat is one. Good to remember, it will come back. If we look at the next slide, just again, a bit more examples, but more on the, let's say, on what's called the borderlines or on the frontiers of the bioeconomy. I like it a lot, the example of food manufacturing. You have production of bread, chocolates, crisps, like really food consumer products coming out of the factories. And there you also have a lot of residual flows that emerge, and we call them former foodstuffs. So this is not small quantities. This is like 3.5 million tons of these kind of products that are kind of harnessed from food manufacturers that don't make it to the human consumption market. Grass biorefining, you look at really taking that wide availability of grass and turning it into, or converting it, refining it into different fractions, where you also have a fraction that can go to animal feed. And then, some more examples. Let's go on, because if you look at the bioeconomy and the role that feed plays in it, and we've mentioned energy components, so really it's bioenergy, then animal feed and renewable energy production, or let's say bioenergy production, has a bit of a, I would say, a love-hate relationship. If we go to the next slide, we look at where do we have synergies in principle, and it's And you can state actually that the Renewable Energy Directive, so aimed at stimulating renewable energy production, has been the biggest driver of EU feed protein meals production in the last, 2 decades or something. And it has to do with the fact that farmers are stimulated to grow products like crops like rapeseed or sunflower. And from that processes, from rapeseed and sunflower, you can extract biodiesel from the oil component, and you result with a protein meal, a protein concentrate. So this is very much used in the feed sector. Also in ethanol production, you can extract that from maize or wheat, that's cereal based, and there you have distillers' grains as a recovered nutrient. So the crop-based biofuels, in principle, it has quite a negative perception, and you can have a debate on that. But something we do want to highlight, there's more to just the crop-based, the biofuels-based element for those crops. As you see, if you would incentivize the cultivation of crops like rapeseed and sunflower in Europe, we will have more reliance on imported soybean meal to get our proteins from. So this is with Renewable Energy Directive revision being announced, it's an important factor to keep in mind. Well, we go to the next slide, where we also see we have a clear competition element, and this is really in the domain of what we call residual biomass flows. If you look really at the Renewable Energy Directive, there's an annex, the Annex 9, which is on, it's a list of advanced biofuels, so really being marked as feedstocks that should be stimulated or are stimulated to be used in biofuel, bioenergy production. And these have minimum objectives, targets. They have eligibility for double counting, so they have like a counting mechanism that makes them count towards the overall targets for renewable energy in transport. And some examples there, you see it on the list, is biomass fraction of industrial waste, not fit for the food and feed chain. And you have animal fats, I wanted to make it come back. And in principle, you would say these are things that we, category 1 and 2 animal fats, that these are things you would not use in animal feed or in pet food or in oleochemical sector. But because of the flexibility that exists at member state level, because it's a Renewable Energy Directive, the implementation takes place at national level. And there is also relative freedom for the classification if something is a waste or a residue in terms of the Renewable Energy Directive. And this is something that certification bodies actually do. They can classify something as a residue or waste for advanced biofuel. This can, we know this can cause the downgrading of the product quality. So something that would maybe have been a form of foodstuffs, you will have your bread conserved and go into animal feed. The mechanism from this advanced biofuels component will make it downgrade and will never make it reach the animal feed market. And in that sense, it's very tricky to put your finger on it, because the moment it has become a waste and it goes to energy, you made energy out of waste, you did a good thing. But this part of the bioeconomy where something is like, say, the nutrients are not preserved, this is something we have no real transparency in, and we hear it from the field, but we don't actually have the precise data. Otherwise, I would have data now saying, okay, this is how much we lost. But we go to the next slide. And wanted to putting things in perspective as well, because if you look at the Renewable Energy Directive, in principle, it has the right safeguards, it has the sustainability criteria for advanced biofuels, it has this cascading principle, but yeah, in practice, it's a different story. And there are other dynamics also at play. You will have food manufacturers or these primary processing plants like sugar, beet processing or beer brewing, and they sit on these enormous piles of co-products or byproducts, and that they will use this for their own energy production to become carbon neutral and reduce energy cost. I find it also hard to criticize. So I don't want to be too dogmatic either, saying it should always be feed. And again, that only makes it more complex. Then two important policy drivers also is the emissions trading system and the CSRDs, that's the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. They influence the dynamics as they put the focus on carbon emissions reduction. And if you look at a bioresource or biomass flow and its carbon emission reduction potential, then feed stands no chance against what you can achieve in fuel. You replace fossil fuel and you take away the carbon emissions related to that. It's way bigger than what you could achieve if you use it in feed. But then again, it's not a level playing field. We cannot compete on carbon, but we want to compete on nutrients. I mean, there's other kind of qualities to these resources. So this is also something important to keep in mind, that steering the bioeconomy only on carbon emission reductions is a losing game for us in principle. So what could we do? What could be done to help circular feed? I would hope everybody's in favor of saying, yes, we want to be, the feed sector should be based on what it can harness from the circular bioeconomy. Then something I pointed to, this need for increased transparency. So we would say, like, you have this residual biomass creation, even though you could create all biomass creation, but we need to have transparency on the terminology applied, where it's created and where it's destined. And that's a funny thing as well. The name of a biomass flow depends on where it's destined to. So it's completely opaque. But we've called for a kind of biomass fact sheet. Some people may be familiar with the EU protein balance sheet. We would like to have something similar, but then for biomass. This idea of circular feed, we try to promote it. I mean, it ticks the boxes for let's say, more sustainable feed production, more sustainable livestock production. So this is something within livestock and aquaculture production that we try to promote. And then it should be really for those owners of the residual biomass, there should be some kind of incentive as well for them to want to contribute to more sustainable livestock and aquaculture production. I mean, you have to keep in mind, they have their primary production focus on something else, and these residual flows, they will look, let's say, how can they get most economic value out of it, and how can they maybe have as least trouble possible with it. And this is something, you can stimulate from a policy perspective. You can make things easier. Then as a market driver, maybe a bit utopia, but would be nice if the downstream value, so you talk about the food manufacturers, the retailers of animal products, that they would really want to see circular feed being used, and maybe create some kind of economic incentive, as well as remove some market barriers. I mean, for the moment, it's just margins. It's like low cost formulation. And then final point I will move into is review the EU regulatory framework to enable access to more circular feed resources. So that's my final section of the presentation. So next slide, because we will talk then about the future of circular feed. I mean, where do we go from here? So on the one hand, we would really like to hold on to what we have, or maybe make more of what we can already legally use. But is the time right to look at the regulatory framework, which was in our sector made in times of crisis? I mean, and we have a legacy, so I'm very much aware of that. But the legislation is very restrictive, and if you look at these kind of sectors, and I know it's too small to read. These are screenshots from the Circular Feed publication. But if you talk about algae production, I mean, there will be a presentation on it as well. Looking forward to hear about that. But also insect, single-cell proteins, and phosphate minerals, recycling. Yeah, this is all, let's say, in the domain of using nutrients that are currently in the waste area. So tackling that and being mindful of innovation and being mindful of, okay, we're able to prove that it's safe, should trigger the debate on can we maybe use this in animal feed. So we go to the next slide. We've taken a bit of a consolidated approach. So not just FIFAC, we joined up with we were 8 associations in total. We have a thing called the Circular Feed Platform, and we produced a Circular Feed Catalog. This is publicly available, where we lay out all the principles for safe production, stimulate kind of what we call circular feed culture, But we also included 17 case studies to really highlight these are resources that we would like to see become available to the European market. And yeah, the policy objective, I mean, timing is right, I would hope. It's the EU Bioeconomy strategy coming up. We have the Circular Economy Act coming up, that this would trigger a circular feed roadmap where, in this case, it would be DG Sante. They would have to be mandated to say, okay, we want to outline the options that we have here and then really put to work EFSA. So that's the European Food Safety Authority. Say, okay, can you deliver an opinion whether this or this is safe? It's a long-term objective. I mean, that nothing changes from there. But it's something that we would need to start today to have a result in 10 years. That's a bit the reality. And then I will move to my very last slide, just so you see. These are the case studies, so I will not address them one by one. We've done a bit of a estimation of the kind of quantities that could become available. Also important to be nuanced here. There's no magic solution here that you would say, okay, you approve this and then you can stop importing soy. But what you will see is that actually most of them are related to the animal byproducts regulation. And that's a sensitive story, but we do think, I mean, it's something FIFA calls for, is to have a really thorough review of this legislation and see where you could address these kind of points and allow the feed use for these resources. I went through my whole presentation. I don't know if I have time for questions, and otherwise I take my seat again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van den Brink, for the full presentation. And in line with this question on what's the future of circular feed, I'll have my colleague Olaf Fjeld from Bellona Oslo presenting how Norway is shifting to sustainable end feed production. So Olaf, the floor is yours. And I can sit there if you want to.
Thank you. Since I have quite many slides, can I change it myself?
Of course, that would be the...
I can start while she's prepared. Yeah, my name is Olav Fjell Kregre, and I work as a senior advisor in the bioeconomy team and focusing on feed and food. And I will talk about Bellona's view for accelerating production and inclusion of more sustainable feed raw materials. Can I get the point? And to ensure you get the point there, I will go straight to 3 key points of my talk. I'm going to illustrate there are methodology and alliances that can collaborate towards a feed shift, feeding animals in a sustainable way. 2, I've gone through how Norwegian agriculture, feed sector is interacting and part of the European food system. And 3, how the food system again is linked to the bioeconomy strategy. And we have had more input earlier today, both from FEFAC and from Dr. Potocznik on the bioeconomy strategy and the overall theme of bioeconomy. As you see here, we have made an illustration of how the food system can work in terms of you have, an illustration here with feed from land, from ocean, and also different fermentation and other processes here. So Bellona, we made a raw material initiative. We teamed up with raw material producers, feed producers, where we together looked upon the feed system in a holistic approach, including circularity. The agriculture sector has steady volumes of, for instance, byproducts, and that is a source for high quality proteins. However, the agriculture sector in Norway is not part of the European economical area. Hence, we will use the feed sector for aquaculture as the case on the work on sustainable raw material here today. The fish feed value chain in Norway is large, And all large production system has impact on its surroundings. The numbers here are setting the frame. You see that 1/3 of the climate emission is related to the food system. 70% of the freshwater use comes to produce food. And 80% of the deforestation is related to the food system. So it's a huge impact. So we have to reduce the footprint of the food we eat. And that has to be done through a system approach. It cannot be up to each single of us each time we go in the grocery store to decide what is sustainable. We have to have the system approach. But then again, little Norway in the context of big Europe. So in agricultural feed, in Norway we make roughly 2 times as much fish feed as in Europe. Those 2 million tons, those mainly goes to one species in Norway. While in the EU, there's much more high diversity of species in the fish feed sector. That includes, that follows that it's much more easy to implement changes in the Norwegian fish feed system. Because if you do a monitoring or checking one raw material, you can easily implement that into the whole feed production system. So Norwegian fish feed system is fit for changes. And in addition, in Norway, we have a governmental approach which is called the Social Mission on Sustainable Feed. And that has clear goals. All raw materials are going to be from sustainable sources within 2034. I will come back with some numbers on that later on in my talk. And the food sector has also pathways on climate reduction, and the feed sector, the companies, they have also ambitious goal, and more of them have signed up to the Science Based Target initiative. So there are both governmental plans and private sector has initiatives to support this road ahead to a feed shift. And then, as said, Norway is integrated in the European food system. And Norway exports 21 million meals to EU each day of salmon. And actually 2/3 of the Norwegian salmon production is being sent to EU. But however, also a large part of the feed we make in Norway use raw materials from European Union. So we buy feed raw materials from EU and make food out of it that we can deliver back. And since the feed legislation is some of the same in the EU and in Norway, we can easily work with this. So Norway is, for practical purposes, part of the European food system. But back to the main picture, the overall trends on the planet. There are 70 million people are experiencing food insecurity due to climate changes, which the graph on the left here shows. And then earlier today, we have heard about biomass and the fight for biomass. We have said that we need biomass, but in the sea, the marine biomass in the sea is forecasted to fall with 5% per degree that the Earth is heating up. And in addition, the harvest forecasts say that will drop 1 to 3 percentage points per decade ahead. So we have some challenges. And that's why with this in mind, that some sources for biomass are expected to decrease. We are on the beginning that the society has to agree upon a system for prioritizing these biomass resources. As the Bioeconomy strategy draft says, competing demands for biomass are expected to increase. And we also heard about that earlier today. Bellona has been, and we continue to propose and implement the bioresource hierarchy. Hence, we think it's positive that the strategy states that the Commission will work towards disincentivizing inefficient biomass combustion, for instance. So there are positive signs there. So within this hierarchy, in Norway, we then, as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, Bellona teamed up with the raw material producers and feed producers to make this raw material initiative. Because if you're going to make a realistic forecast and proposal, you have to have the stakeholders on board. So we made a plan with some prerequisites. For sure, the number one was that nutritional quality of the raw material should be in place to ensure decent, proper nutrition. And then, of course, reduce CO2 emissions and, for instance, proportions in terms of energy use. And then the Alliance agreed upon some raw materials, identified the most promising ones, and in a 2 decades perspective with potential volumes. So here are the ones, the cultivated ones, and there were some harvested ones from the ocean. And to ensure circularity, of course, byproducts from land and sea, and then fishing and agriculture. And then after going through all those resources, mapping out down volumes for those, we have this metrics here. We had to find out which barriers are there to realize and to make those volumes possible to make. What are the economic barriers in terms of capital investment, for instance? Which technology? Are there some regulatory barriers? We heard about category 1 and 2 earlier today. And for sure, environmental considerations and sustainability. And after this mapping was done, here are some numbers. To the left, you heard I mentioned earlier in my talk about the social mission on sustainable feed. The aim there is that 1/6 of the total Norwegian within 2034 is going to come from new sustainable feed ingredients. Producers and the raw material producers. Because that report shows that more than 600,000 tons is possible to make within 2030. And in a longer perspective, 1.1 million tons of new sustainable raw materials. Now, here's a figure that shows which raw materials we pointed out. I will not go into details on the different raw material sources. Just briefly mention that a large portion of those that are framed out here are based on mature technology and can be realized. However, such production of these raw materials, they demand substrate for the fermentation, for instance. And then this substrate has to be available in the feed value chain. That's the reason why we promote this bioresource hierarchy. So, then the status of this raw material feed initiative in Norway. As I said, there's consensus on how one can reach the implementation of the new sustainable raw materials among the key stakeholders. And these stakeholders, they do regular update their mapping of what are the potential and possibilities. On the other hand, there's a need for a common agreement on how fast to reach the potential. We have the numbers, what you can reach, but you have made a commitment that it's going to be reached by when. You have only the potential. And how much do we have to put in to get there? that means what incentives are there? However, there's one successful point here, and there has been a strong and coordinated push on the regulations. So the Food Authority in Norway did a good job on being active on the regulatory part here. And then just starting to sum up. So there's mature technology to produce some of these volumes. However, it's an immature financial strategy, and the framework is not clear how to make this volume. So that needs to be in place. So that was the trying to bridge together the why Norwegian fish feed system is very fit to do the feed shift, and in with the food system in Europe, so high exchange of raw materials and food and feed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ola, for the inspiring presentation. The Raw Material Initiative clearly shows how collaboration across industry, research, and policy can drive the shift towards sustainable feed ingredients, reducing emissions, while also creating new jobs and value chains. I would like to just quickly mention that we're a bit delayed on the program, but we have our last presentation before the coffee break. So we'll continue on this theme of innovative feed solutions. We now turn to a company that is putting circularity into practice. It's a pleasure to welcome Susanne Paulsen, CEO of Algicel, joining us online. Algicel is developing carbon capture microalgae production that turns industrial CO2 emissions into valuable biomass, an exciting example of how industrial symbiosis works in action.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. I hope you can hear the sound in the room. And can you put on the slides, please? So while you put the presentation in, I can maybe also do a short introduction of myself. So as our first speaker, I also have a family history in the feed. My grandfather was a feed miller. My father started his career trading corn in Europe, and I have myself, prior to joining Algicel, also been heading up the global animal health and nutrition business at Novonesis, or Novozymes as it was called at that time. So today I'm here to share what we do in Algicel as maybe a small example of how we might find solutions to some of the problems that we have been talking about this morning. And therefore, I'm also particularly thrilled to see microalgae production and phototrophic microalgae being mentioned as one of the solutions in both Anton's and Olaf's presentations this morning. Yeah, so right now you can say Algicel is a 4-year-old startup company based here in Denmark, where I'm sitting today. We have an international and experienced team. We're 19 in total with, you see here, the management team. But if you go to the next slide, I'll tell you more about the company and how we fit into the problems we're talking today. So as we already spoke about this morning, the challenges of how we feed the world today are not the way that we should be feeding the world tomorrow. We see both the climate impact, as mentioned with the CO2 emissions, but also the biodiversity and loss of arable land, and particularly for what we just spoke about, namely the marine resources. We also see both ocean pollution and overfishing as a result of how we are producing and extracting resources today. For our customers, this, and for us as consumers, it means fluctuating supply chains, it means volatile pricing, and it means, as we're also seeing very prominently today, food security risks. And as one of the previous speakers showed, that this is particularly true for other parts of the world than maybe the one that we are in today. So it's a global problem that hits both upstream and downstream. Therefore, a lot of us in this room today and online are, you can say, spending our time on enabling the green transition so that we can move from extraction into more circular bioeconomy and have low footprint solutions. And here in Denmark in particular, we're trying to coin a whole industry around biosolutions. So I think one of the previous speakers spoke very much about the totality of biomaterials, and you can say biosolutions is also a broader umbrella term for how you might solve some of the issues that we're seeing today. So Algicel cannot solve all of these issues, but we can try to make a small contribution. So what we do is that, in essence, we produce high quality, high performing ingredients, and we try to do that both at scale, as the previous speakers have talked about. It's a massive industry, so we need to be able to go to large volumes to make a difference. And at the same time, we need to deliver at cost. It's a very mature and cost competitive industry, both in feed and in food, and therefore it's performance at cost. Nobody is willing to pay yet for a green premium. So you are in there. We talk a lot about a fair playing field. I've been long enough in the game to know you need to perform nutrient-wise, you need to perform, you can say, functionally in the feed, and then you need to have an attractive cost game. And that's what we're trying to do at Algicel. So we work with phototrophic microalgae. So as you will remember from your biology class, it's what you see in nature, either in the ocean or in the lakes. So it's algae that thrive from CO2 and light. And in nature, it's sunlight and CO2 from the atmosphere. In our system, it's an industrial system where we use CO2 from industrial sources. That can be biomass, that can be biogas, that can be fermentation. It can also be fossil-based CO2 sources, because the algae, they don't care. But for the footprint of the final product, we're of course looking to use biogenic CO2. And then we need a lot of light. In our case, it's an artificial light, so we use LEDs, and for that we need a lot of renewable energy. And therefore, I'm also very happy that the first speaker talked about how the energy transition goes together with materials/nutrient or food supply chain, because I think that's actually where we in Europe have the opportunity to also tie industry value chains together. And I say that because I also started part of my career in renewable energy at Ørsted, or Dong Energy, as it was called at that time, getting offshore wind off the ground. So I've seen how we can, over 20 years, develop world-leading technologies at scale. And I think we have an opportunity to now combine biological solutions or nature's own solutions with also the energy transition, to make sure that we in Europe become both competitive, but also that we have some of the leading technologies that we can apply at scale. So from our, you can say, the result of our production system is that we've built it in a way where it's flexible and scalable. So you see this little small container unit in the lower right-hand corner, which is where the algae is produced. So it's a modular and very compact system that can be applied and scaled up, where you take, you can say, the unit economics out of the scaling game compared to if you're, for example, scaling in fermentation. So once you have documented the unit economics for one production unit, you can flexibly and modularly scale it, also meaning that you can tailor it to where you have the production system. The impact of what we are doing is that we will be using virtually no land. It's a very compact system, as you can see. We're recycling all of the water. This is a salt water based system, and we are reusing virtually all of it. And because we use CO2 as a feedstock and have no CO2 emissions, it comes with a very low CO2 balance. Not entirely negative, but very low. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is a schematic of what we do. Let me see if I can get my pointer also to work so that I can help you. Can you see the pointer on the screen? Maybe not. I'll talk you through it. So what we need is a source of renewable energy. That is something that we have here in Europe, and particularly here, of course, in the northern part of Europe, where we've been at the front runner of applying renewable energy, everything from hydro and offshore wind, etc. So we need renewable energy, and then we need CO2, for example, from a biogas. And in our system, we're willing to pay for the CO2. So we spoke about that there will maybe be a hierarchy of biomass. I fully support that. I also believe that even though we see CO2 as you can say something that we are putting a penalty on today, I actually think in the future there will be a competition for CO2 because, as you will see in one of my later slides, there's actually a number of industries that can use CO2. So we'll also be paying the CO2. And that means that for the farmers, we will be paying them. So today they are emitting the CO2, and we will actually be paying to take the CO2 from them and use that as a feedstock into our system. Then on site, we produce in the bioreactors the microalgae, and we also do the first step of harvesting and drying on site. So our system can be set up where you have the emission of the CO2. And then we can take and harvest the biomass and sell that directly as what we call a wholesale biomass. Today, we are working with a particular microalgae strain called Nanochloropsis oceanica that has some very special properties in the sense that it has a very high degree of omega-3 fatty acids, in particular EPA. And as humans and animals, we need both EPA and DHA, as you may recall from your fish oil that you take in the morning. But as you may also know, the fish oil doesn't come from fish. It comes because the fish eats the algae. So right here, we are now producing biomass and all fractions of the biomass where you can get your omega-3 fatty acids, you can get a protein source without ever having to see a fish. So it's a sustainable way to deliver nutrients that have a high quality nutritionally and that has a very low footprint in terms of both CO2, land, and water. As you see in the middle, we can do a further refining of our biomass so that we can actually extract more valuable compounds. In the case of the strain we're working with today, we can extract the algae oil so that you can work with the oil, and then you have a protein fraction left. And we can even extract more active compounds that could, for example, be applied into cosmetics. If you go to the next slide, please. It's a patented technology. I think this one is not so interesting for the topic that we have today, but I think maybe the key point is that we have a combination of a scalable technology that we have built and that we own and have patented. And when we combine that with the biodiversity of available phototrophic microalgae that can produce in the system, we end up with a very flexible output, so very flexible different products that can be produced via this system. And we actually have a number of researchers that have been working with phototrophic microalgae that are now coming to us and say, can you produce? So algae cell can both be, you can say, producer for others with our technology, but also produce ingredients and ourselves. If you move to the next one. So how does this fit into a circular economy discussion as we're having today? And I put a more simplified than some of the more previous speakers. It's not to say that it's a simple solution, but I like to put it schematically. So today we have animal production that can be aquaculture, as we talked about, or RAS systems. It can be monogastrics or ruminants. They produce manure and other byproducts, as we also saw. Today, that can go into different facilities, among others into biogas. And those biogas facilities can then upgrade their production so that they can send some of the gas back into our energy system, but they still have a CO2 fraction that today they are just venting out into the air. And that CO2 fraction is what we need as a feedstock for our system. So we need to take the CO2, then we use the CO2 and the renewable energy on site to produce the microalgae that then becomes ingredients back into the animal feed, and that then becomes nutrients for the animal production. So this was a way to try to explain in simple words, how is it that we see that we can actually close the loop and have a full circle economy. I will also be honest in this forum to say feed is actually not where we are starting because of the cost points. So today we will be competing with nutrients that are produced in less sustainable ways, but are also at a very low cost. And therefore we need, before we are more mature and on our cost journey, to actually go for more higher value applications into pet food, into human food, into cosmetics. And having been in the feed industry for more than 10 years, I actually think that's also part of the challenge in when we want to enable new sustainable categories without having a fair playing field, neither on cost nor on regulation. If you go to the next one, I also think that was my point around how can we actually see CO2 as a source, and not only you can say something that is bad. So on the top you see how we might use the green part of the biogenic part of the CO2 into carbon capture and utilization. So you use carbon, or what we here call power to biomass, with smaller capex needed and still being able to produce at scale. That's what AlgaCell is an example of, but there's also others out there doing the same. And with that, we can produce proteins, we can produce omega-3 fatty acids, we can produce vitamins that can be put into feed, food, and cosmetics. At the same time, we still need to also have solutions for the black part or the fossil-based part of the CO2. And that's where carbon capture and storage can come into the picture, or even those who want to use power to X in order to produce both green fuels, chemicals, and building materials. So in a carbon economy, we also need to start viewing CO2 not only as an evil, but also as a source if we put it to use in the best way. So if you go to the last slide. So where are we right now? We are 4 years into the journey. We've been running our pilot facility here just outside Copenhagen for the past 2 years. We are in what we call demonstration phase. So we will be scaling the technology from the current 700-liter reactor up to 3,000-liter reactor starting next year, where we then need to validate our technology at scale, integrating it at an industrial site, proving our productivity, and also proving that our capex and therefore cost of goods match up with what is right now in the, you can say, Excel sheet. At the same time, we're validating that the product actually works. We are testing in pet food, so dogs and cats. We've also tested in aqua feed and got really, really nice results. But the good thing is we also have some really honest feed producers who will tell us what is the cost point. And so far, we are not able to compete. So that's why we're starting in pet food and in cosmetics where the price points are higher. After that, of course, comes full commercialization. So as a startup, we will also need to go fundraising in 2026 to enable the next part of the journey, where we will be establishing our first commercial scale site. I would love for it to be in Europe. I would love for it to be close to home in Denmark. But that means that when we need to have a favorable energy price, because we are very energy intensive, and that's actually back to the point in the beginning, energy transition and food transition goes hand in hand, because right now there's actually parts of the world where there's more favorable energy prices, and therefore would be more favorable for a company like AlgaCell to establish production. But being a European, I would love to have Europe for Europe, and also establish local supply chains and building on all the technology and knowledge that we have here. Next slide, please. So we are scaling up with Novonesis, the world leader in biosolutions. Right here, an hour's drive from Copenhagen is a huge industrial hub in Kalundborg, and there we will be putting our technology inside the fence of Novonesis, taking the CO2 from their biogas, so an industrial source, and producing, you can say, volumes that starts to be relevant at a commercial scale that I think Olaf also talked about. So last slide. Yeah, I think in the interest of time, I will actually skip this one. So if you go to the last slide. Thank you. Yeah, okay. There was supposed to be 3 bullets on the last slide, but never mind. I will summarize. So before I take questions, so for AlgaCell, we are all about feeding the world in a more sustainable way. We will do that using phototrophic microalgae. For that, we need CO2 that we're willing to pay for, and we need renewable energy. And with that, we can produce high-value ingredients at cost, at scale, and also with a positive sustainability footprint. I'll end my presentation here. I can see there's a question in the chat. Today, most commercial microalgae oil suppliers use heterogenic microalgae, while autotrophic systems remain less common. Why is autotrophic production generally more costly or difficult to scale, and how is AlgaCell addressing these challenges? Yes, so we can say we've seen, so for those not so familiar with this, heterotrophic is where you use it with fermentation, and we have some good competitors out there that have gone the fermentation route and that are able to produce at scale, also because fermentation is a technology that is, you can say, well established, actually originated out of Carlsberg. So you can say we know how to scale fermentation and therefore have been able to, you can say, produce algae in fermentation. Whereas those who have gone the autotrophic or phototrophic path have not yet been able to scale. And that's part of what we're trying to solve in AlgaCell, is to really from the get-going on say we need to produce at scale and at cost. And part of what we are, or the invention of AlgaCell, and therefore what I will not reveal everything around because that's what we've patented, is exactly this ability to focus on throughput in the system. So it's all about, you can say, energy to biomass and how do you optimize that. And that's what we have invented, both in the way we have designed the system, the flow, the actual mixing of it. So it's all about how do you get the most out of the biology. That's the real invention of AlgaCell, and therefore I can also not disclose everything that we have invented. But I hope that, and I think that's part of the problem, that the category has not taken off. It's a niche category today because the price points have not been able to come down. So it's being used in high value applications like cosmetics. All cosmetics brands have an algae-based line, and then it's, you can say, too low volumes for it to be applicable into the normal, you can say, feed value chains. So security of supply and ability to scale is what our partners are looking for. And that's what we, of course, have to demonstrate that we can do as well. Any other questions from the audience or online? If not, then I also know I'm standing in between you and the coffee break. So now this was a brief presentation of what could be one of the solutions to the problems we're discussing today. If you have input questions, you're more than happy to reach out to me via LinkedIn or via my
Test. Yeah, maybe this one better.
Microphone. All right. Well, thank you, Mrs. Palsten. I hope you can still hear us online. It was a very great example on how we can turn emissions into resources, which is paving the way for sustainable feed. And now, a much-deserved coffee break. Please be back in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Sorry for the technical problem.
Okay. Having do you want me to wait or no? Okay. So having this seminar today, we thought that would be a great opportunity to gather a panel and to try to focus on both on feed and as part of the food system. And as the name of the panel says, how can we close the loop and how can we get high value use of biomass for more sustainable feed? This morning, we heard in the keynote speech, Dr. Potocnik, who gave us, he painted up the bigger picture for us. And he had quite some memorable quotes, but one of them that I noted down and I thought was worth mentioning now is that he said, material footprint is dangerously under-discussed. And I think that's a good introduction for today, because in Bellona, we focus on feed as part of the food system and as part of the solution for the food system when we're dealing with the climate crisis. So we need to discuss how the material footprint, how is it, and how can we get it down. We've also heard from one of the panelists who will join us now, Anton van den Brink, and he both showed us on some concept of circularity in feed, but also gave us some insight on how the Renewable Energy Directive are driving protein production in Europe. I thought that would be very interesting to get back to as well. My colleague Olav gave us some input on how Bellona is working on feed and raw material. And also we've, in Bellona, the focus being the climate changes and how the feed system fits into that. And that's always an present topic for us. Last now, before we went to break, we heard also from Algicel on how a company, a startup company on a new raw material such as microalgae needs to deliver on both quality, volume and price. And therefore, they're not able to go directly into feed for agriculture or aquaculture. They need to go into pet food because they pay better. So all of this is a little bit of the background of the panel that we've gathered here today. It's quite a big scope, and I'm very happy we have a strong panel to discuss the topic. So without any more ado, let me introduce and please welcome up our distinguished panelists. We have Dutch MEP, Dr. Jessica van Leuven, a member of the European Parliament and representing the EEP. Please come up and take your seat. She has a scientific background in animal science, and before entering politics, she has a long experience working with both livestock and feed industry. Welcome. We have also Dr. Pierre-Mathieu Pellissier, representing the European Commission, where he works as an officer in biotechnology and contributes to the European biotechnology regulatory environment, as well as he's been very involved with the upcoming bioeconomy strategy. Please welcome. And please welcome back also Mr. Anton van den Brink, representing FIFAC, who you already met earlier today. FIFAC is the European Feed Manufacturers Federation, representing 28 national associations. And then, last but not least, please welcome Dr. Sam de Campenaert, Scientific Director for Animal Husbandry at ILVO, Flanders Research Institute for Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. And we are in a situation where we need to share one microphone for the technique to work for us today. So I will be giving away mine as well for some time if I can get it back. But I just wanted to do like this so I can actually see you while I'm talking. And I wanted to start with the MEP and ask the question that I will ask all of you. And that is, what is your main ask for the bioeconomy strategy?
My main ask, well, there's plenty, but I think the most important one is to realize that it's not the green alternative towards a fossil-fueled economy. It's too complex to just call it like that. I mean, it's in practice more of a trade-off. So what I would like to ask is to have that common sense, because what we like to do in the European Union is to run after the new buzzword, and the new buzzword now is bioeconomy. But bioeconomy is not something new. Bioeconomy is what we've been doing for centuries already. But it's good that now it gets the attention that it deserves, because that means that we are liberating funds to really stimulate innovation and to drive this further and quicker. But we have to realize it's a trade-off. We cannot do everything what we would like to do. And we also need to be realistic on the burden that we put on top of our industries, and how can we make sure that while pushing forward the bioeconomy, at the same time we remain competitive.
I realized I might have to take that back. So maybe you can take that microphone, and then I forgot to mention very briefly in the beginning that if you have questions or the audience online have questions, you can put them in the Slido. It's there already, great. And then use the QR code for that, and I will be able to post some of the questions in the end. Then to Dr. Peer, you're representing the commissioner. So I'll tweak it a little bit for you. What can we expect from the bioeconomy strategy coming next week?
All right. So indeed, the bioeconomy strategy, it's the third iteration. The first one was in 2012. 2018, it has been revised, and now there is a third iteration. So indeed, it's not really a buzzword, because we have been working on that for a while. There is also a draft that are circulated, but it's remained an old version of the bioeconomy strategy that has since then undergone into inter-service consultation, where everyone had a weight and a word to put in it. And so it's really a document that is consensus and that tries to find a compromise between sustainability but also competitiveness on the bioeconomy aspect. So what can be expected new in this iteration compared to the previous version? There is a strong emphasis, and it was a bit presented in the presentation before as well, on the different valorization of the biomass according to the cascading use principle. There is a stronger emphasis on the fact that the biomass has to be used in priority for food, feed, and high-value applications, which are not linked to energy production, for instance, biomaterial, and so forth, that are less prioritized. There will be also an emphasis on lean markets. So again, I cannot speak on what concretely the strategy will contain, because it's not published yet, even though you may have seen a leaked draft in the past few weeks. But the bioeconomy strategy will contain some lead markets that are the priority for what the biomass and what the focus will be for the use of this biomass. It's mostly biochemical, new biotechnology approach, high-value fermentation, and feeds will benefit from those lead markets in this sense. It's maybe not directly as a lean market itself, but it's inherently a lean market in the sense that more than 70% of the biomass today in Europe is directed to the feed use, and the 30% else is going to other side. So there is a lot to say about what the bioeconomy strategy contains. I believe the next question are also digging into more specificity.
We'll go back to it more, yeah. So just thank you for now, and then I'll get back to it afterwards. If you can pass on the microphone then. So from the academic perspective, as a researcher, do you have any expectations for the bioeconomy strategy coming?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Well, first of all, maybe not really as a researcher, but as a consumer and as a member of Europe, I hope that the bioeconomies can help to restate a little bit the function of animal husbandry. Animal husbandry is quite hardly criticized. For instance, we are doing in our research institute quite big investments in infrastructures to do research on animal husbandry. And a lot of people ask the question, why do you invest in animal husbandry? I think for the coming decades, animal husbandry will be very important in the bioeconomy, and I hope that that message will also be in there. Secondly, really from the research perspective, I hope to find a balance between ways to finance research in the really applied examples, like we saw the example of algae, but also the fundamental research should be supported. Because, for instance, feed evaluation techniques is something that is really important in any example that you want to investigate, but that is really not funded anymore. And feed evaluation is really the core business of what we need to do research in examples. So I hope that there is some balance in there for those two. And thirdly, also what mentioned by speakers this morning, I hope that research gets the possibility to do a holistic approach. Because too many times we have to look at methane reduction, ammonia reduction, whatever, but all those things go together and we should look at it holistically.
Thank you. Brief comment also from you, Mr. Anton. What's FIFAC, or you're representing the industry here, so what's your perspective or what your ask for the bioeconomy strategy?
Yeah, of course, I just had 50 minutes to be able to highlight it, but so a bit of repetition, but maybe first of all, the data-wise, they say 70%, 70, because indeed the latest figures I saw was around, was it 30% for feed and energy, the up and coming one, but it maybe links up to one of the key requests that FIFAC has, which is increased transparency into where are the flows originating, what kind of name and where they're destined to. As now, if I also look at the data, often we say, okay, you have these biomass flows, and often you have like huge sections called waste, where for me it's not clear indeed, like where is this coming from? Should it have been waste? Because we have this idea that if we could be able to bring more transparency in identifying and where the biomass flows come from, this could enable to make it more eligible for animal feed purposes, to be more able to respect that hierarchy. And as I highlighted, indeed, there is this, I think, a tendency in bioeconomy strategies in the past as well to look at, okay, bioeconomy is turning waste into a resource, but for us, it's all about keeping the nutrients in the food chain. And that's kind of, I think, a qualifier that is, yeah, maybe we haven't found the right, like waste to energy, that's a nice word, but yeah, that's what we call circular feed, and trying to keep the nutrients from going lost. So that's, I think, a key request we have here.
Thank you. You pass the microphone back up again. And I'll ask firstly, Jessica. In the strategy, we're talking, and we've talked a lot about it this morning, the hierarchy of uses or biomass ladder, the cascading principle, many words for it. And that is emphasized. But from your perspective, how can politics create a better and more sustainable use of biomass? And how can it be implemented, if you can elaborate a little bit?
Well, the interesting thing in this few minutes that we have this panel is that we already have a different definition of how much biomass actually goes to feed. So my own number said around 38 to 40%. The Commission says 70%. I hear 30% from FEVAC. So I think here we have already a key topic, because what is the definition then of the biomass? So if we're talking about biomass ladder and hierarchy, first of all, I think we need to agree on what is the biomass and what waste streams consider, and what just crop-based biomass do we consider? Because this is a big issue. If it's 70% versus 40%, the difference is huge. So I think that's what we have to start with. Then in the leaked version of the bioeconomy strategy, and maybe it has been adapted since the leaked version came out, but the word feed was only mentioned 6 times. And this is a crucial part of the bioeconomy strategy, right? If we want to turn waste streams into something valuable, and then I completely agree, it restates the importance of animal husbandry, because animal production is crucial in upscaling those waste streams and at the same time providing nutrients to fertilize our soil with. So there's a couple of things. The problem is that we have too many rules and limitations for industry today. So it needs to be simplified. And of course, we have this bioeconomy omnibus coming on, but it's more than that. What I see is that it's a paper exercise. And a lot of time on paper, stuff looks very nice. But when you come down to the reality, there's a lot of limitations and restrictions. For instance, the use of animal proteins in animal feed. So if we use processed animal proteins in animal feed, there's a lot of limitations there. And some are there for the right veterinary sanitary reasons, and some are there just because we make it more complicated. And we are not aware of the dependency that we have in Europe when it comes to amino acids, for instance, coming from China. The day that China decides to just say, okay, Europe, you don't get any more lysine, you don't get any more threonine from us, we're in big trouble. So we've created a lot of dependencies. And what we also forget in this bioeconomy strategy is that it needs to be economically feasible. If you take feed, it's 70% of the production cost of a farmer. It's not its barn, it's not the installations, it's not the animals. Feed, 70%. So they will always try to make it as efficient as possible. So if we don't manage to make the bioeconomy profitable for farmers, so if we don't make it in a way easy to access those waste streams, and those waste streams need to be efficient, because let's be honest, a protein is not necessarily a protein. There's a lot of difference in the efficiency, how an animal can use a protein when you compare them. If you have, for instance, animal proteins, they're very efficient. You can use them because it's very simple. You know, if you want to build meat, if you take meat or something that comes from the animal, the amino acid profile is very similar, it's easy to use. But when you start using plant protein, it's less efficient. Soy is quite efficient because it has a very good amino acid profile. That's why we are using so much soy. So we need to make sure that what we offer in the waste stream is efficient, can be used in the same way, which will allow us to reduce dependency on soy imports, and at the same time, those amino acids. And we can do that through innovation, because we've seen feed conversion rates going down over the last 20 years with about 15%. That means you need 15% less biomass for the feed. In essence, it's a little bit different, but you need less. So we can achieve a lot, but we need to be aware that all these things that we put on paper have a consequence when it comes down to the farm.
Thank you. I think it's a great way to transfer the microphone to your side manner. And from the Commission's perspective, then, on the hierarchy of uses, do you agree that it's a play on paper? Is it how do you think that will be shown out in the different countries? If the Commission have any.
Yes. So on this number that I mentioned, 70%. So the Commission for the bioeconomy strategy relies a lot on input from the Joint Research Center, which is a neutral data provider for the Commission to help us build our strategy. And they have a dedicated bioeconomy knowledge center who measure those biomass fluxes and so on. So the value varies. It goes from 50 to 70%, but it includes animal bedding as well. So it's not really indeed feed per se, because it's biomass that goes toward animal production, not only animal feeding. It's also including other biomass streams. But on the cascading use principle, that's at the core concept of finding an interplay between sustainability and competitiveness. And having the highest added value as well for biomass producers, the farmers. So at the core of the bioeconomy strategy is this new income stream production for farmers. And this is done by creating actually a market pool. So the European Commission has a lot of strategies to create enabling technology, stimulate the innovation and so on. The bioeconomy strategy is more recognizing that there is a need for those, but it's also creating a market pool, so creating a market for those new biomass. So if we want biomass to be used for higher added value, food, feed, and so forth, and not burned or used for other purposes that are considered as less value, we need to create a market demand for the feed application and so on. And this goes via innovative approach. So bioeconomy strategy mentioned integrated on-site biorefinery, advanced fermentation technology that will valorize side streams that are not valorized yet. It was mentioned before a lot of aquaculture waste products that are, for instance, today waste. But by recognizing biotech, for instance, as a key enabling technology, we can valorize it in different way. And this strategy really emphasizes on creating a market pool and everything that is needed, whether it's innovation or whether it's financing and regulation simplification as well, so that those markets exist. And so does the cascading principle is not pushed unnaturally towards high value application, but it's done naturally because those markets exist and it benefits biomass producer principally.
Thank you. Can you pass the microphone? So, from a lot of research and innovation, a lot of new startup comes out from academic environment, right? And from your perspective, the Commission says there is a need for innovation. There is a need for to make it, of course, to make it fit into a value chain where in the end it becomes economically viable as well. But do you think that the bioeconomy or the tools that the Commission are providing here with will it help startups and new innovating work in your field?
That was a little bit the point in my first answer to the question that you posed, you first asked to me. I already indicated that I am pleading for a more balanced funding system where you not only see money for startups, new ideas, innovations, but also for the fundamental research that you need. You indicated clearly the cascading principle. A lot of new side streams will come to the feed sector. They will have to deal with them. But nowadays we have very little techniques to very quickly estimate the value of the product, whether you can feed it to chickens, to pigs or to ruminants, what is the protein value, what is the energy value. We have very few ways of doing that. And the number of streams will be increasing in the future. And secondly, they will become more variable. So we really need in the future very quick but precise techniques to estimate what is the value of a new side stream and how can it be optimally used in the sector through the feeds. That's really fundamental. And I'm a little bit scared that that aspect is not really as sexy as the innovation aspect is. So I'm pleading for that.
All right, thank you. I just wanted I would very much like to hear your comment on it, Jessica, but I just wanted to ask Anton, firstly, because you had in your slide one very clear demand from the politicians. You said, if you can repeat what you said on your last slide, and I don't remember the words exactly, but you wanted a circular feed
roadmap.
Roadmap, thank you.
Yeah, I think indeed, for the full context there was to operate within the zeitgeist of today, and that we, together with some other organizations, are able to put together case studies where we say, okay, you know, if you see indeed, like for renewable energy production, there are strategies and there's a directive and there's a way that the politicians want to go. You would hope indeed that within the world of feed production or animal feed, we of course have a livestock strategy that's going to come up, that's coming then from DG Agri. You would hope that they would make circularity a core part of it. I mean, they are supposed to do that. But then you talk the mandate given, because there you go. We're talking bioeconomy strategy, the DG Envy, then it's DG Agri for the livestock strategy, and then it will be DG Sante actually sitting on all those files where you would need to see regulatory change. And they will have to give the mandate to EFSA to work on this. So there is need, let's say, for political strength to say, okay, we want to see this happen and we want to spend the resources and saying we want to be able to set out this roadmap, identify which nutrients could kind of be still harnessed. But yeah, I've heard today about being pessimistic and optimistic, so I'm trying to be very pessimistic. So in the end, it won't be that bad because I know we will see pushback, and I also know indeed if we talk about the topic being sexy, indeed I think bioeconomy strategy will be far more interested in highlighting bio-based materials, these kind of things. It's just what captures the imagination more than the world of feed, and that's also a last point indeed that I think indeed Commission and many policymakers will look at the biomass that goes to feed, and it is a lot. And we'll look at it and say, well, actually, you know, you could maybe use that and put it into other stuff. Even though the hierarchy is there, I think we're very aware that within the bioeconomy, people are looking at the biomass flows going to feed and thinking, well, could we maybe make something out of it? And that's maybe very fast last point, because the agility indeed of feed manufacturers to respond, because we hear it from the field all the time as well, that call them traditional side streams going into feed, that the nutritional composition changes because they're able to extract nutrients from it, like a potato peels, classic thing that goes to the pigs. But now they're able to extract, and kind of starch components. And you have the same product reaching your factory, but you have to adapt or compensate for the nutritional differences. Yeah.
Would you like to comment a little bit on some of the questions that were already directed in a politician's way, please?
Yeah, I think, and that what my fellow panelists here say is basically what I was trying to say also in the previous round. What we have to be aware is that if we want to use waste streams, we have to create the conditions that you can actually use it, because waste streams are indeed variable when it comes to their content. That means that sometimes they contain more and sometimes they contain less protein, and you need to be able to adapt to that, because there's probably nobody in the world being fed better and more efficient than poultry and pigs, because it's calculated down to all the amino acids, so they get exactly what they need. What happens if we start to use waste streams is that we go back in time. You know, when in the old times when everybody had a pig in the backyard and it got the potatoes, and the feed conversion rate of those pigs was not very good, because they ate whatever. Well, they would grow in the end, but they would need relatively a lot of feed to be able to grow. Today, we need very little, because everything is fine-tuned, and still research finds ways to fine-tune it even more and start using fast proteins that are, better able to be absorbed quicker, and we need less soy and well, fantastic. But if we go and implement waste streams, then we create this risk of going back in time and losing our feed conversion rates. So this is something very crucial, and I'm glad that this was brought up, because it means we need to get the framework, but we need to get the funding, we need to get the possibility to do so. And then we reach a very important topic. What the European Commission likes to do is to say, okay, let's extensivate areas that are very dense in livestock. Let's, distribute it more equal across Europe. But this is detrimental if we want to have a bioeconomy. Because if we want to have this bioeconomy work, we need to have hubs. So intensive livestock hubs. Because there we have all the logistics aligned to be able to use the waste streams the quickest possible, and in order not to lose that efficiency. So it really requires a shift in our mindset, where we like to say, okay, we have some dense areas in Europe and we want to get rid of it. No, this is good. We need to keep those, because those are fundamental for the bioeconomy.
I just wanted to follow up on one of the things that you said, because maybe we have different examples, but from my perspective, when we use waste streams, we could use it that it would go through a protein processing sort of, like if you use a waste stream and feed it to soldier flies, then the protein that come out on the other side would fit into a formula that would keep the feed food or the ratio as good as it is today. So wouldn't it be, if we are to sort of like set it down here, that the new feed needs to keep the standard of the old feed, could we then look into waste streams or other ways of using our resources?
You could, but is it cheaper than soy?
No, that's a problem.
Exactly, yes. Exactly. And that's why it's not in big use today.
Yes. Would you like to comment on, from the Commission's perspective, on
your last question?
Yeah.
Well, the protein sovereignty is an issue that is also tackled in this bioeconomy strategy, and so it's indeed more expensive to not just import soy. The thing is that we are dependent on soy imports, and protein sovereignty is a critical issue in Europe, and so we have to find this balance between sovereignty and economic cost, basically. And so everything we are doing and everything we are trying to do with this market creation, and even with our Horizon Europe funding, or with the first of a kind infrastructure that we are funding through the CBIGU, typically Plenitude here at the border between the Netherlands and Belgium, who is trying to prove that it's economically feasible to process protein via insects for animal feed and human food. is trying to solve this issue, basically. Those first of a kind are here to demonstrate that it's actually economically interesting and feasible to do that. And so it's indeed very difficult to compete with soybean, basically, but for sovereignty matters, we need, and sustainability matters as well, we need to find a way to do that, and the Commission is working toward it.
Thank you. I wanted to pick up on something else that was mentioned by FEFAC earlier today, and that is and also others, and that is the high need for changes in regulation. And I think you mentioned it already in your introduction, Jessica, that there is a lot of regulation that hinders the use of biomass or bioresources today. Is that something that you will you touch upon it at all in the upcoming strategy? Is this part of the work that we will see in the years to come?
Inside the bioeconomy strategy per se, no, because it's not a legislative document, but it lays the ground for a lot of action done in Omnibus package, the EU Biotech Act as well, that will try to cover more legislative aspect. There is a lot of issues that are related to not necessarily biomass, but high-end use of biotechnology, for instance, for feed product and so on. A lot of uncertainty as well. A typical example that came up to us last week, for instance, is a cultivated meat company that is using cellular agriculture to increase the palatability of plant-based feeds for animals. So you put animal cells in it, and it increases a lot the value because the animal feel like they're eating a much more palatable feed. The problem is that, is it considered as an animal byproduct while it's cultivated meat? It's an issue that is not tackled by regulation now because this kind of technology are new. It's the same with precision fermentation as well, where you can use atmospheric CO2 to produce microbial protein and feed to animals. There is a lot of uncertainty in that, and all this technology have capacity to tackle a lot of feed and food issues. We speak about feed, but food is also very much sharing a lot of issues with this. And the bioeconomy strategy will not tackle it per se, but we have a lot of other vehicles that will try to improve it from a legislative point of view and regulatory point of view.
Thank you. Is there any question that has come so far on the... So can you let me know then when I shall be able to... Yeah, okay, ask the questions from the... Okay, then I think I will change the subject a little bit. It was mentioned today, we've talked about the biomass hierarchy, we've talked about the hierarchy of uses, but then FEFAC, Mr. Anton van den Brink, mentioned that, you mentioned something I would consider a dilemma. Do you agree? Yeah? Because in your presentation, you said that what is driving protein production for feed now is the Renewable Energy Directive. Could you please elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, it's nuanced, and I call it a love-hate relationship, because indeed, for all that we've been discussing so far, we have the competition for residual biomass flows, but we have to be very cautious, and soy has been mentioned, and can have a lot of debate about soy, but I think using more soy will not make us more circular. But if you look at the past 2 decades, something that feed manufacturers have been able to incorporate into their feed mills from the European soil, that's rapeseed meal and sunflower meal. So that was very much driven by the Renewable Energy Directive, the financial incentive given for farmers to grow these crops for the oil component. So rapeseed oil and sunflower oil going into biofuel for biodiesel production specifically. As kind of a residual biomass flow, we would be able to pick up the rapeseed meal and the sunflower meal. So this is something that we as a sector would not want to go without, because the moment that's vegetable protein sources that you won't replace it one-on-one with soybean meal, but thanks to feed additives, you can complement the nutritional profile of sunflower meal and rapeseed meal. What to say indeed. We know that that's probably something, if there is going to be a revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, the key focus also in the debate, it's been mostly driven by palm oil actually. So that's maybe a bit the elephant in the room, that palm oil, of course, has its challenges, crop-based biofuels, and we would have to be careful not to see rapeseed production and sunflower production being caught up in Europe in let's say, the negative perception of these products, if that's clarifying anything.
Yeah, it does. Anybody else wants to comment on that? I have some comment, but I would like to hear your thoughts as well. Yeah, please pass down the microphone.
Yeah, I would like to comment on the use of the feed additives.
Yeah.
The more we will use waste streams that are variable, of course, the more we will need to use feed additives. And whether that is simple ones like amino acids that were already mentioned and that we have a high dependency on China from, we also need different type of feed additives, gut health stimulating feed additives that stimulate digestion and absorption of proteins, for instance. The problem is that it takes maybe 5 to 8 years in the European Union to get a new feed additive registered and approved. So, I mean, and that's why I keep calling it, you know, it remains a paper exercise unless we are willing to see the whole picture. You know, if it takes 6 months to a year in the US to get something approved, like a feed additive or a biocontrol agent, and in EU it takes 8 years, then how can we believe that our industry remains, and not only the farmers, not only animal feed, but industry as a whole, how do we believe that we can remain competitive? So I think we have a very, very important task ahead of us to reduce the registration time and approval time of new products in general.
Thank you. Dr. Sam, do you want to comment on that? Or
no, I was just thinking about, I fully agree that with the problem, and another example with the same issue is the gen techniques that we are not allowed to use in Europe. Maybe also there, I know it's quite a sensitive topic, but maybe we have to look at it closer and look at possibilities that might help the sector to increase its flexibility to find solutions.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on your on what you said, Anton, and that's maybe without starting a new round of discussion. But if we are to believe that there is such a thing as a good priority of biomass resource, as the Commission also said with the hierarchy of uses, could we then look at what is incentivizing in the Renewable Energy Directive? Is that where the problem, or not problem, but that's where? Is that the key, that the incentives are driving it in that direction, so we therefore get...
Yeah, but you have to keep in mind, it was an unintended effect.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
we have the Common Agricultural Policy, and for all the good that the Common Agricultural Policy has brought, it has not been able to tackle this protein dependency we've had since decades. And it's a funny anecdote though. I mean, there's been 5 and there's still a protein strategy in the drawer of the Commission somewhere, and I've seen one from the 70s where they also looked at rapeseed meal, and also it only became available to our sector because they made changes into in the anti-nutritional factors that were in the protein concentrate. So if I feed additives, because it's a broad topic, and indeed feed additives is part of the mix as well, but in that sense, the NGTs, the new genomic techniques, crop innovation technology, but your question was indeed on how to stimulate the production of those products. You of course, within the Common Agricultural Policy also have coupled support for protein crops. But then again, yeah, is it ever able to match this bioenergy component? Maybe my rough estimation would be no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will take a couple of questions from the audience in the end. They are not directed directly to somebody, so I will just post them openly and see whoever wants to answer this. But firstly, what are the biggest missed opportunities facing the EU feed sector? Nobody wants to? Yeah, please.
Maybe I can start briefly. A big missed opportunity again about this biomass flux is maybe the algae sector, which
algae sector.
The algae sector is quite a missed opportunity in the sense that it represents, again, it's a fourchette, but between 0.3 and 1% of the biomass, total biomass available in Europe, while it's extremely sustainable because it doesn't require land, it doesn't require fertilizers, it doesn't require watering. And well, Norway typically is one of the biggest producer of algae and seaweed in Europe, and probably worldwide as well. And so I believe that it's maybe not a missed opportunity, but it's a huge untapped potential. So we didn't really miss it, but this is something that has a huge opportunity for food and feed use as well, and even biofuel as well. It's a really platform biomass that is underexploited with a lot of opportunity.
Thank you. One question for our MEP. If you're sporty enough, what role do you see for the EU policy in standardizing feed valuation metrics so they align with the biomass hierarchy and reinforce food security objectives? Yeah. What role do you see for the EU policy in standardizing feed valuation metrics so they align with the biomass hierarchy and reinforce food security objectives? I could have never asked this if I didn't know you knew so much about feed already. It is a very difficult question, but please.
In terms of policy, I think we have enough policy as it is. I mean, if we look at farmers today, they are subject to 35 distinct EU regulations that sometimes contain up to 50 delegated acts. So I don't think it's a policy thing in the sense of making a regulation. Feed matrices, of course, are not part of the EU competency of what we're supposed to do. And please not, because the time we start doing this for animals, then we're also starting to do this for humans and tell us what we can eat and how much of it, which sometimes it looks like that is where we're heading. But so no, not in terms of matrix values, but it needs to be considered that it has a consequence for this feed matrix when we make a policy like the Bioeconomy Act. So I understand the question, and in my opinion, it is something that we have to consider. So I would welcome it very much if the Commission would sit down with animal feed nutritionists and say, okay, what happens if we do this? And what does it mean for the rest of the diet? And can we really make this happen? Now we just... And that is a problem because it's very specific, it's very specialist information, and we see it happening in other, something simple like the animal transport regulation, which is supposed to be simple, but we have 3,000 amendments because apparently it wasn't that simple. So you really need expert specialist information in order to make this policy work. So that would be my request to the Commission. Please make sure that you involve the right specialists when going down the path of implementing this. I hope that answers the question of the person who asked the question.
Thank you, and very sporty to answer such a broad question. I think that's more or less what we had time for today. Thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you for this session.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are loads of topics to be discussed.
Well, thanks to our panelists for the vibrant discussions. It's been a truly energizing morning, and I hope that you have also enjoyed it. Now I want to say that. No, previous slide. Previous. That's the next one. Yes, that's it. Yes, so I think we're all looking forward to the publication of the updated EU bioeconomy strategy, and more importantly, translated it into actions. So it's time for a little interactive quiz. I'd like to ask you, before we close our event today, to join on menti.com. You can follow the code, or you can use your camera and join the QR. And I think we need the Menti. So I'll take a second to do it myself. Can you all see the first question on your phones as well? Thank you. Okay, so it's time to start. In which year was the first EU bioeconomy strategy adopted? Have you all voted? I'm not going to be able to show the results. You know all the IT issues we have had today and past that. But I hope that you have all voted, and the right answer is 2012. As Pierre explained, we are going now towards our third bioeconomy strategy. Well, Natalie, can you maybe go into the next question? I have it here, and in a case, which of these are identified as lead markets with the highest potential for bio-based innovation? You can click on 2012 and go to submit. It's in the screen. There. Yeah, thank you. Just, yes, thanks. Whoa. Right, guys, so this might be an additional layer of today's situation. All right, we are gonna fully skip this. I'm just gonna update you on what's happening next for Bellona. Besides, hopefully, no more technical issues in our future, I would like to say that we have several initiatives underway. We have 3 upcoming reports and a full summary of today's event, and an ambitious plan for developing a biomass hierarchy, which is one of the things I wanted to point towards too. In Bellona, we like to call it the biomass ladder. So we also see this workshop as laying the groundwork for future work for next year, continued dialogue, actionable policy recommendations, and yes, another event in 2026, so we hope you stay tuned. Before we officially close, I want to first of all say thank you to everyone for your participation and for your patience today. I would like to say thanks to the audience, panelists, and presenters for your energy, insights, and contributions. Special thanks to the team in Oslo and Brussels for the cross-office work and incredible collaboration, as well as our comms colleagues whose support made this event possible. And with that, we officially wrap our workshop. We have a lunch at the Salon d'Honneur, and I thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to continuing this journey towards a low-carbon, sustainable bioeconomy together. Thank you all.